Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good day. You're listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I'm your host today on this journey into creative exploration. It's a beautiful, we call it cool morning here in Dallas. It's 70 degrees. Some people would laugh that we call that cool, but it's actually the coolest day we've had in a long time. I have a wonderful guest today that I feel like I have instant chemistry with, and she reached out to me through my book and through another reader. And she is in the UK, which is really exciting. So here it's morning and there it's, I guess, mid-afternoon. So good morning, Irene. How are you today?
Good morning, Chris. I'm very well, thank you. And very much looking forward to our chat.
Do you think 70 degrees is cool?
I think 70 degrees is perfection. It's warm, but it's not hot. And it's what I would wish for. We've had some crazy temperatures during this year's summer, which we're simply not used to. Top 80s, 90. We don't cope with that because we're not built for it. We don't do aircon everywhere, and we're just not used to it. So now that we're moving into autumn, you can see I'm wearing a scarf. It's nice for me. It's nice for me to feel there's a slight chill around my neck.
All right. Well, yeah, it's a beautiful scarf. I will remind the listeners that we're also featuring this on YouTube, so you can see us talking in person, or you can listen to us through Apple Podcasts. I want to introduce Irene a bit here. She is an abstract painter, so you know I love her because I'm an abstract painter, and she is a coach. She first picked up a paintbrush. Gosh, this is not that long ago, Irene, but 2018. 2019 saw her dive into 2 intensive online courses that catapulted her into exploring her theme. And this is why I brought her in, listeners. Her theme, everything is connected. Everything is connected. An observation she'd arrived at over 30 plus years as a mystic, investigating how to be, I love this, Irene, more fully human. That's wonderful. So I'm excited to talk to you about this whole concept of everything is connected and share your thoughts. I would be remiss in not mentioning that I imagine your whole country is in mourning right now with the passing of Queen Elizabeth. It's on the news here everywhere in Texas.
Yes, there's a lot of it. There's an official 10 days of national mourning leading up to the funeral. And I think it gives people from all quarters of society opportunity to say anything they want to say, basically. So,
and they take that opportunity, don't they?
Oh, they do, yeah. Things like books of condolences, which seem an odd thing, but people are willing to queue for a long time to enter a building and write a short message in a book. It's a very symbolic thing for a lot of people to do. So I'm pleased that those are set up and that people who want to can make use of that.
Oh, I've never heard of that. That's not something that I'm familiar with here in the States. So people, they have these locations around the city and people can write in a book.
Yeah. Churches of all kinds and cathedrals and public buildings set up books of condolence, and all people are welcome to queue up and come in, and they're given a private moment to sit and write their words and then file out. And the next one files in. It's a nice ritual, I think. I think it's very meaningful for a lot of people.
It is. It's a beautiful ritual. It ties in actually with your theme too, I think, because Queen Elizabeth's presence has been such all my life, right? All my life.
All of mine.
And so she's iconic in that presence, and it shows how indeed everything is connected. Mm-hmm. We even though I'm across the ocean in a totally different place, how that resonates and how it has resonated with me throughout my life.
Yes, and it's interesting because I saw a speech by the president of France earlier today, And one of the things that resonated for me with what he said and brought home to me what you've just said was that in the UK, she is your queen. In the world, she is the queen.
Oh, that's
And
lovely.
I think that's true. I think virtually anywhere, if people were to refer to the Queen, they kind of are automatically understood as referring to Elizabeth, except, of course, for those other principalities and that have their own royal family. But she is known very far and wide as the Queen. Mm.
Yeah, it's quite the presence. And I love the idea that you said, you know, when you talk about writing those feelings in a book, that goes back to journaling.
Yes,
Um, do you do journaling with your teaching?
I do journaling. I've journaled. Since I was around 30 years old, that was the pivotal time in my life when a lot of things changed. So, you know, we might get to that. It's one of the important things. Um, and for many years, I journaled avidly, ferociously, fiercely, deeply, searchingly, intensively, every single day. It's not so much now, but it is still my great ally. It is still my switch. When I become stuck or lost with something, I know that I can switch that simply by picking up the pen.
Yeah, it's a great practice.
Yeah.
I think I did it for years before I truly understood. I think you have to do it for a while before you get the benefit because um, looking back, then I started noticing patterns in thought. Right.
Mhm.
I would journal and journal and journal. And after even after a month. So I encourage my listeners, if you haven't done this practice, it's where you get up in the morning and you can I type it. I know I cheat, but I am a left-hander. And so I type it, but it's typing out your thoughts, stream of thoughts. And what happened was I would stand back and I'd go, oh, you know, I keep having this returning thought, whether that thought is that I don't have enough money or that I'm not good enough, whatever, fears, insecurities, also things that you appreciate, right? I mean,
Sure. Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think to what you're referring to there might be what some people know as morning pages
yes.
from, yeah, from Julia Cameron.
Yeah.
And her recommendation to people is to simply write, and it's literally stream of consciousness. And she says 3 pages, normal, you know, no paper size, printer paper size. Just write it. It doesn't have to make any sense. It doesn't have to be full sentences, but do it. And that's a practice I did for a time as well. But my normal journaling practice is much more conversational, talking. You know, it's not stream of consciousness. It's very much more aware and directed. And on the coaching side, I am part of. I am a coach on a program, which is not my own program, but journaling is very much interwoven into the teaching and the coaching on that program because we know that even as a person who is exploring art and hasn't really thought about the bigger things in life, maybe too much, the spiritual side of things, perhaps, even for them, when they come up against blocks, journaling is just dynamite often to those blocks. They don't know it's going to be. They take some persuading, some of them, but they discover that when they begin to journal while they're also trying to move their art practice,
Boom.
wonderful combination. Yeah.
Well, tell our listeners a little bit. Well, first, I want to ask you what made you start painting? I mean, if people are watching this, you scream artsy. I'm an artistic person, you know, artistic scarf, hair, outfit. So, what made you? I mean, 2018 was only 4 years ago. So,
Sure,
what
sure.
motivated you?
I really, really don't know. It kind of snuck up on me over time. I'd say that for lots and lots and lots of years before then, I'd known that I was an artistic person and I'd dabbled in art a little bit and I'd tried this and I'd tried that. I'd gone to some classes, I'd done some life drawing, some watercolor classes, etc. And I always discovered that I kind of was able to do these things. You know, I could make a person look like a person. If I painted from a photograph, it would look like it. There was something of me that came through no matter what it was I was painting or drawing. And that was always quite interesting to notice, but none of it set me on fire. None of it made me carry on and, hold on to it for any length of time. And then maybe 2 years before I started, at the end of 2018, I'd come to recognize an artist on Facebook that I liked, and I exchanged details with her, and I went to do a workshop with her. And it was fun, it was nice, but it was basically, here's a canvas, this is what we're going to do. You choose an image, and then she directed the painting via her own stylistic choices. So I did a kind of a painting in the style of her. And at the end of it, it was very beautiful, looked lovely, great, took it away, but still was not on fire with this. But what she had done to help me was she'd introduced me to acrylics. And following that, I bought myself some supplies, but it all took time. And for some reason, I don't know why, it just didn't start to really happen until all of a sudden, at the end of 2018, I just knew that I needed to express myself through abstract art. And this idea was already in me. Everything is connected. That had come to me, through spiritual journey over many, many years. It was how I saw life, the world, the universe. And so I began and was simply experimenting with paint, trying to make some little scintilla of that big, huge idea come through onto these canvases I was working on. And it was okay. It was fun. I was painting weird looking stuff, which satisfied me more than painting realistic looking stuff. And then it was in the beginning of 2019, very shortly afterwards, that I discovered the people who would then take me through 2019.
Wow. Well, you said like 4 things there that that I'd like to follow up on. I do think I have found that so many teachers, art teachers, they lead you down a path to do what they do. And there's very few that lead you to listen to your inner voice. I think that's really what I tried to do with my book, is teach people to go all the way back to that child in them and start going back and do a mark making exercise and see what marks are them. We all have creative, unique DNA. And so I've taken so many teachers. I remember a course I took way back 20 years ago. I took a class and the teacher lined our paintings all up on the wall, and everybody's looked like his. It was done in his style, but mine did not. And of course, when he got down to mine, right, he was like, well, Chris, as though the goal was to look like him. And it was a little, I encourage listeners, don't let that slow you down. If someone says something about your work, sure enough, after the critique, 3 of the students came up to me and said, Chris, I have to tell you, I really like what you did. Yeah. And I think it's important that you hear that inner voice. So one other thing you mentioned that I just want to follow up on with this, because we could just build to this, everything is connected, but you do say that in your bio there, more than 30 years as a mystic. Could you explain just what a mystic is to our listeners if they're not familiar with that term?
Yeah, it's my understanding of it, and I hope I'm not, miles off. And coming out as a mystic is harder for me than coming out as gay. I came out as gay to my family only last year, and only to my close friends like 16, 17 years ago. So I'd lived a long life, not hiding it, but not really aware of it, if I'm honest. So coming out as a mystic is tough for me. I can feel the nerves in my tummy right now, but I'm going to tell you what it means in my understanding. The whole of the universe reveals to all people who care to look that there is something wondrous behind it. That is what I understand as general revelation. It's there for all. But personal revelation is something that any mystic would tell you they've had, and their experience or experiences are vast and various. And I have experienced personal revelation unexpectedly and unsought. And it turned my life like that. It was as though I was in one moment completely and forever changed, but it also signaled the beginning of this long, arduous path towards cleansing and healing and becoming more and more and more human. So the mystic in me, the mystic that I have to claim, is she who was given individual revelation.
Okay.
That's made my mouth go dry. I am nervous to talk about that, Chris, but I'm glad to do it.
Oh, I love it. I always go, I really do love it. I when you say personal transformation, is it just a knowing that you're connected to everything, or was it a specific experience, or both?
Yes, I did have a very specific, huge experience, which at the time, and looking back on it for a number of years, I used to describe as God came down just to me alone. He came to me directly. And in that experience, in what happened to me, there was no way that it could be misinterpreted or misunderstood. And I knew from that moment that I was utterly, totally, completely, without reserve, loved and adored. And the effect of that was to blow me apart in such a way that there were no longer any secrets. Everything about me was already seen and known by this force. And so I had utter and complete confidence to then dig in and allow the rubbish in me to be revealed, because I was in the company of this presence that was accepting me, even whilst I was discovering for myself the depths of my own darkness. There was no shame. I could no longer be ashamed. I was being forgiven and healed all simultaneously. And it had far-reaching effects in my life, in as much as I became an open book to just, in every situation really, I understood what it was to be a depraved human. I understood that I was capable of the darkest of deeds, and that it was still okay. I was still completely and utterly loved. And the transforming power of that experience and the ongoing experience of constant self-examination, it just made me, I suppose, more and more transparent, more and more capable of owning up to who I was, and more able to, I suppose, in embracing myself, embracing all people. Now, remember, we're talking about now nearly 40 years of work to be that, become that. None of that happened immediately. All that happened immediately was the unshakable knowing that this hugeness totally accepted me. And at that time, it was for me, God in the Christian understanding. That was that had been a very recent explosion in my life. That was kind of the step one. The step two was this massive thing that happened to me. But my understanding of what that is has moved on beyond religion.
Right.
So it's taken and continues, It's taken a lot of years, and it continues to be an expansion. You see, the universe never stops expanding, does it?
No.
So, we are atoms in the universe, and we too are expanding. And so this becoming more fully human is ongoing.
It is. Oh my gosh. Once again, so many things. One of the things you mentioned in there was, I think, seeing the truth. I will say this, I'll put it in my words, okay? And then for me, it is seeing the truth in everyone. So I see God, spirit, love in everyone. And that's that unifying, everything is connected for me, that we are all. And so you were saying that once you had that experience, that you started seeing people differently. Is that?
Yes, absolutely. I could identify with people. Previously, I had not. I had separated myself from other people, and I was a very lonely individual who played a role, who was strong and invincible in life, and took charge, and had this all-powerful kind of front that said, "Don't mess with me, don't challenge me. It won't work." And so people tended to say, "Fine, yeah, we'll let her take charge," because they could see this wasn't a tyrant as such. This was a front for the person who wanted to do good. I wanted to do good. I wanted things to be good. I wanted everything I was connected with to be better and good. And so I just grabbed them and took hold of them and said, well, "This is what we'll do. We'll do it my way, because my way is best," basically. That was who I was. And it wasn't until after these massive life-changing experiences that I felt, well, can I rewind slightly and just lead in to the massive life-changing experiences? They were preceded by a very human experience that cracked me open. And the cracking open was like the signal for spirit to go, whoosh, we've got her, we're in. She's listening. Not that spirit had never been communicating before, but I hadn't been listening. And this cracking open became my first remembered experience of vulnerability, and therefore a need for other people and a connection to other people. And into that space of vulnerability came these life-changing events that turned everything, stratospheric for me.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Like, once again, so much. So I was going to tell you, when you mentioned you coming from earlier a place of separation, we're going to jump in. We're going to make you vulnerable with both sides, with the mystic side and the outing you being gay. I am also gay, and I've often thought that our society, there's a special challenge for gay people, and I'll speak from my own voice. Let me say, there was a special challenge for me as a gay person. In a lot of ways, I was restricted from participating in societal things. Like we couldn't have a relationship. We couldn't get married. We couldn't have children. And I have found that my life has been this experience of breaking those norms. I am in a 31-year relationship with my husband.
Wow.
And we only got married on our 25th anniversary, which is amazing when you think about it. We were together for 25 years before society allowed us to get married. The negative, the positive of that is, because it pulled me so out of center, it made me be able to look at life from a different perspective. But it also alienates you from people. And I have to say, and then I will share it. My listeners know this, but I have a son, and we adopted him 18 years ago. He just went to college. So I got to participate in having a family and having a home and having a relationship and raising a child. I got to go to PTA and be the PTA mom. And I did all those things. And that helped me. You talk about life is is a process of expansion. It helped me see the universality in everyone, you know. But it is challenging for someone who is born different from what the majority is, because right? You know?
Yeah, but the weird thing for me is I didn't even know myself until I was 50. I didn't know. And that goes back to a kind of traumatic, I guess, young life and the teenage years where I was without my personal power. That was how I arrived into the teenage years, when all the sexual signals are flying around like mad. It was also only kind of the end of the 60s. And I didn't even know about gay. I didn't even hear about it. It wasn't talked about, recognized. You might hear the odd horrible wording or phraseology directed towards a gay man, perhaps, but I wasn't aware. There was no conscious awareness. And so during my formative adolescent years, as a person who had arrived with no sense of personal power, I became prey to those who felt they wanted me, basically. And that was guys. And I followed the norm, and, there it was. It just kind of took me along in its flow. And I had male relationships, and I got married, and I had 2 children. When I reached 50, I had at this point just separated from my husband of several years, lots of years. And I began to be aware of it. And I was best friends at the time, spending a lot of time with a gay friend. We were going to the gym together and stuff like this. And I just kind of realized there was something in me. And anyway, I came out to her, and then to 1 or 2 other friends, and to my sister. And I started to remember. Many, many, many little instances way back in time when I might have recognized it, had I had any awareness of it as a thing, So I'd never recognized it, never been aware of it, only came out when I was 50, and didn't even bother coming out to my family, because I was thinking at that time, well, it's a need to know basis thing. If I meet someone, if I meet a woman, then clearly I'll tell my kids, I'll tell my parents, I've met someone and it's a woman. So I didn't think they needed to know. And then early last year, I came to a moment when I realized that leaving that door to full revelation ajar wasn't satisfying. I didn't like it. It was as though I was uninviting anything unexpected to come up in my own life. So I thought, sling that door wide open and then let everything flow in and out as it needs to. So I told my children, to much hilarity. They kind of went, oh, right, and laughed as if to say, what next, Mom? What next? And of course, they're of a generation that just goes, yeah, well, whatever. It's completely fine to them. So my separateness from other people was down to the fact that I would not allow vulnerability. So other people's weaknesses and vulnerabilities when I was a young woman, they were not for me. I was going to be invincible and strong until this one event in my life with a friend cracked me open, made me feel vulnerability for the first time, and allowed this new stuff to come in.
Oh, lovely. So how did all that, so at that same time that you were coming out to your children, was that when you started painting, or is that before that, or?
Oh no, it was only last year. I started painting at the end of 2018. So it was only last year that I told the children. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they already knew me as, very independent. I've lived alone for 17 years. I became an artist out of the blue. So they're like, yeah. I've traveled around the world on my own. They know me as a can-do person, not frightened, capable of doing her own thing. So they just kind of took it on the chin as just one more thing for mom. Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to a pin I put in back in earlier in your conversation. You were talking about when you were learning to be creative, and I resonate with this. I share this feeling. I can do literal, realistic drawing.
Yeah.
But it never has engaged me. And
Mhm.
I'll have people always say, well, don't you want to draw a fruit bowl? Or, or don't you want to draw a figure? And I'm like, there's a challenge for me in doing something abstracted that shows my emotions, my state, a way of feeling. For me, the challenge is trying to get shapes, simple shapes, that to come and say something without the literal connection of, oh, there's a face, there's a silhouette. So how do you feel about it? I mean, because obviously you're going for abstract. And I want to share with the listeners, I did look at some of your work, I watched some of your videos, and it's for only 4 years, it's very sophisticated.
Oh,
It's very layered. It has a lot of what I call story to it.
yeah.
I love that. You can see things peeping out. And that's really what I think is a successful piece of work. I want to see history. So what is your engagement with abstract? Why?
Well, I just knew, having dabbled here and there with realism, I knew that it wasn't saying anything for me. It wasn't allowing me to express, even though I could see that, oh, that's good. And, oh, my watercolor paintings are far more bold than those people's paintings. How did, just the meanness was coming out somehow. Right. But photographs of beautiful things weren't doing it for me, to translate. Photographs are photographs for me. The real thing is the real thing. The photograph is the photograph, but painting is something else. And so I just knew that I needed to somehow express this idea I had, this feeling I had, this great big thing. And it was impossible. It was obviously going to be impossible to make a painting that said everything is connected. So it was going to have to be a heck of a big series of paintings, and each of them would have to only in part express some element of that. So I didn't do this in a very conscious or technical way. I didn't go, right, this one is going to be about the way that looks like this, or a tree's root system is the same as a brain, I didn't decide anything. So the abstract painting was always very intuitive. And I guess because the overarching idea was always there, I didn't need to cling to it. It was already there. And so some element of all of the paintings that I did would express some element of that big vision, that big picture. And my abstract paintings have moved through many phases in these few years. I even went through a slightly surreal stage, and they have sort of continued to evolve and they became even more personal around the end of last year. And I was able to home in on what was happening, and it was that they were becoming more autobiographical, more spiritual. That word, I need to put a pin in that word myself.
We'll go back to that.
And more transparent. So they were, for example, an example of how that was happening was, I suddenly decided that I do a lot of layers, as you've noticed. So there's collage and there's paint and there's more collage and more paint and more paint and more collage. And then there's an electric sander that takes off a lot of that and leaves all sorts of textured areas and things to respond to. So that's the way I work, is multi-layered. And I started to use ripped out pages from journals as collage. So, literally my handwriting in various colors of pen were going onto the boards, and then paint, and then scraping back. And during that process, once that process began, I was working on 3 pieces that were larger than pieces I'd done before. And I was doing them side by side. I also had 6, 7 or 8 others within the same series. So when I'm working in a series, and that can be fairly big numbers sometimes. So all these pieces were about the place, but the 3 big ones were mounted on my painting wall side by side. And when I approached them, because they were bigger, everything I did took longer, and therefore the whole growth of these pieces was slower. And I never touched one without touching the other 2 as well. So everything slowed down. And I started introducing these pages from my journals. And I started to have a very deep experience with these pieces, more perhaps than I'd had with others in the past. And they were looking at me. There was a real relating going on. And ultimately, I wanted to put my face into them. I wanted photographs of me to be transferred into them. And I put one fairly almost life-size headshot into each of these 3 pieces. And they developed into me looking at me, looking back at me. There was a real love going on. There really was a lot of love in those pieces, and it was coming at me. And they developed into showing the head as surrounded by light. So the paint in those areas was lighter. And then I knew that this was indicating the fact that all through life I had been safe, despite circumstances that were traumatic and hard and dark and all of that. There was a safety within this light that was dripping down onto me. And I then introduced the darkness, because one doesn't exist without the other. And so these pieces became, this is who I am almost, and spoke very deeply to me. I don't even know how I got to where I am in this conversation with you, Chris, how I'm talking.
But you were talking about, well, they were autobiographical. How do I say that?
Autobiographical.
Thank you. As I said, it's early here in Dallas. So they sound a bit spiritual. So we're going to go back to that pin.
Yeah, sure.
Because I'm sure our listeners are going, okay, what exactly is spiritual?
Yes.
And I could give a definition, but I want to hear yours when you say that.
Sure. Well, because for about 15 years of my life, I was a Christian. Mm-hmm. And I might add an evangelical, charismatic Christian who was having these personal experiences and speaking in tongues and all of that shebang.
Wow.
And trying to tell the rest of the world that were anywhere within reach that they needed to be saved and Jesus had to be their savior. I was one of those, right? Wow. And if you like, that was all by chance. Because if I'd lived in a different country and I'd had the experiences I'd had, I might have been going to a mosque or a synagogue or a Sikh temple. I could have been going anywhere. It didn't really matter. But the true spirit had come to me and was content to leave me within this kind of environment. Because in a weird way, it supported my journey. I was embraced. I was seen. I was heard. I was trusted. I was reparented by this really patriarchal, old-fashioned setup. It did the business for me. It reparented me. And it became my place of safety, a place where I was allowed to try out my gifts. Could I do public speaking? Oh, it turns out, yes. Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I preach? Yeah, you can. Here you go. All of those things were given to me, if you like, as part of my healing and growth. I was able to see myself not only as fully accepted by God, but allowed to be who I was as a human with the support and love of these people. So it was a wonderful experience for me. But nevertheless, this being part of the church was a vehicle. And the journey came to the terminus. And I had to get off of that vehicle. And just as I'd been used to direct communication, words, visions, pictures, all kinds of things, I started unexpectedly to receive a picture, very clear picture. Didn't understand what it was saying to me at first. This was whilst I was on the verge of entering the final stages of signing up to train as a priest within the Anglican Church. So this picture started to come to me, and I saw it a few times before I understood it. All I saw in the picture was, right up ahead of me was the figure of Jesus. His back was to me, and he was striding along. He was striding along, being Jesus. And I was a little way off, and I didn't like that feeling. The feeling was, hang on a minute, hang on. We're supposed to be walking side by side. This is my path, this is my journey, side by side with Jesus. Hang on, let me get to him. And this recurred a few times before I realized what it was telling me. I was stopped from reaching him. It was as though I was being pulled back. And what was stopping me from reaching him was the church, the business of the church in which I was so deeply embedded and so busy. And instantly I understood that vision. I stepped down from being in leadership. I stepped down from being the local schools worker. I stepped down from preaching, teaching, leading services. Whoosh, I simply said, I need to step out. And I didn't know for how long. I thought it was that I just need to get off the merry-go-round and take a break. But it meant, in fact, that I had to simply get off the vehicle. It was no longer going to serve me. And I was instead sent out into a completely pathless land. I saw it in a vision. I saw myself standing in an empty landscape, utterly without features. And that was where I had to go. And it didn't feel bad. It felt like freedom. And then I started once again to really identify with other people, because during the Christian years, I was in and they were out, and they needed to be saved. We were different. All of a sudden, I was with other people. We were the same.
Oh, there's a lot of good stuff in that. So I think sometimes, and I'm going to speak for my own voice and then ask for yours, but sometimes people think that when you say, I don't identify as a Christian, for me, it's not that I do identify as a Christian. So for me, I would say I identify as a Christian and more.
Right.
And more. So people think, oh, you're whatever, in the traditional mindset, some people might think, oh, you're going to go, you're not going to be saved, right? You're going to go to hell or whatever. But for me, it's like, no, I'm seeing that there are all these paths and they're different. And Christianity is one of them for me. And Jesus, I do read the Bible and I am inspired, and more.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you felt that way or yeah.
Sure. I guess I could put it that way. That when I put a pin in the word spiritual, it was because when I left, I had to banish the word God and banish the word spiritual. And the word spiritual became even more tainted when I spent time in the happy, clappy supermarket of New Age stuff. I tried all kinds of New Age stuff. And it was all fun and nice and good and what have you. And I started to notice that a lot of the people I met in the New Age supermarket and all these workshops we would do and things, that 2 years down the line, the people they seemed to be still dealing with the same issues, And I started to think, I know what it is. They live in the supermarket. They don't take any of it home and apply it deeply. And that sounds very judgmental, but I needed to see the distinction that I was most definitely journeying. And a lot of people were in a state where they felt they'd arrived and was simply enjoying the place that they'd stopped at. So the word spiritual, I didn't want to be identified, and I found it really hard to use that word. And it's still only just beginning to get back into my language. So what's happened for me as I've come further along, I see Jesus as the one who brought me in, who introduced me, if you like, to the depth and width and breadth of my path. He's the one for me, but he is no longer for me who he was when I was more an overt Christian. He's not for me God and King and Savior. He is not someone I need to bow to. He's a little tricky lad, and he's great fun and very true. And he is a man who lived his path so perfectly, so authentically, and so deeply, and left behind the pattern that would work for any who wished to follow in his footsteps. And all the key moments in his path that were recorded in scriptures apply to me too. I'm not back in the lands that he lived in the time that he lived in, and having to do exactly the same things. But the stages of his path are the same stages for me. So in that sense, yes, I'm a Christian because he's my guy. He's the one that showed me the way. But there have been other people I've come across who have been precious and somehow imbued with specialness. But it's always him. It's always him that I come back to. And I just kind of see him as the one that laid out the path that for me was most clear.
Well, once again, okay, I'll try to remember all the things. This is great. So I think, oh gosh, you said so many great things. I do think for me, a spiritual artist is someone that continues to grow.
Yes.
And say what you're referring to, and I see that as well. People get trapped in the ego identity of
Yes.
whatever that is, whether that is new thought or meditation or chanting. You can get trapped in it if you too closely identify with it as this material thing. Whether it's, for me, I was Catholic, I was raised Catholic, so it was all about ceremony. If you get too attached to the ceremony, you're getting isolated from your own spiritual essence, which is within. And so for me, I go with spirit, right? Spiritual. Now, moving that to the side, any word is also a physical rock. Like, it's a manifestation, and no word can truly summarize anything, in the sense that because of my memory of the word spiritual might be different from your experience of the word spiritual. So I think what I like to do is I like to work on the plane of consciousness, the consciousness, the truth, the spiritual essence, the non-literal, the non-physical manifestation of what is. And if that makes sense to you. So
It does.
yeah. And so but you're right. Even the word, when I wrote my book, I clearly said, I did this convention where I don't use a word for God. I put an underline in there because I wanted to get onto the spiritual level of this with people. I don't want them to sit there and go, oh, well, no, it has to be Muhammad, or, oh, it has to be Jesus Christ is my God, or it has to be, I want them to use your own name.
Yeah.
Use your own name, because I want you to focus on the spiritual truth of the non-manifested, the spiritual truth. So that said, I mean, I imagine you sound like you had such wonderful tools to go into this teaching. And so tell us a little about these classes that you've taught, and are you able to include your everything is connected into those teachings? So tell me a little bit about where you've been teaching. And
yeah, sure. Did you ask me to say something about the courses I'd done, or just what I'm involved in now?
Both, a little bit. How about both?
Okay. Well, very briefly, in 2019, I discovered Louise Fletcher, who runs a program called Find Your Joy. And I also discovered Nicholas Wilton, who is the guy from Art to Life, based in Sausalito. I did his course first, 3 months, deep dive, for a beginner who knew nothing, who knew no principles, no art principles, and he didn't teach any rules, he taught principles. The overarching principle being contrast. How contrast is what brings the viewer in. And then Louise, whose course I had wanted to do desperately since I first discovered her at the beginning of that year, 2019, and whose course wasn't going to run until after Nicholas's. And I actually said to her, I'm desperate to do yours, but this of Nicholas's, it just looks so amazing. And should I do it? Could I? And she just kind of opened the gates wide and said, you know, how would you feel if that one set off and you weren't on it? And, you know, one or two questions. Anyway, I did both. I did Louise's course straight after Nicholas, and there are similarities. But Louise majors very, very much on, I guess, the discovery of your own voice, not through technique, but through throwing off things that are embedded in our beliefs, things that are embedded in what we think art, in our beliefs about what art is supposed to be like. Things we remember from childhood when that teacher told us, no, you're not very good at drawing or art, so you should do, you know, cookery instead. All those things that people arrive with, Louise majors on removing those so that the inner true voice can be revealed and can come out onto the paper. So that's how she works. And as a coach, obviously it's my job to back her teaching, which is easy to do because I fully support it in all that it offers. And it's a little about getting out of your own way, finding your freedom, finding your voice. And she chose coaches who are all different from each other. We have different levels of experience as artists and as people in the world. And where I've kind of found my niche is very much in the mindset. So we do get a lot of people who begin to work with this teaching and come up against blockages. And some of it's very traumatic, some of it's very emotional. And I have recognized more and more and more that I am deeply intuitive. And so in the moment will arise new words based on truth that never changes, but words that I knew and in the moment for that person. And I would say that's my thing as a coach, is to hear what's really being said. Yeah, the symptoms are arising within the art making process, but what's behind it? What's causing this issue? What's causing this block? And almost doing that with their paintings in a sense. I don't want to talk to you about your painting. I want to talk to you about what I'm hearing, you know. And of course, we do give feedback on paintings at this stage in the second course. There's two courses, one back to back. The second one you can only do when you've done the first. And we do give feedback on paintings. But the rule is we only feedback based on the question that has been asked. So we don't critique a whole painting. And they need to be able to ask very specific questions. I was trying to create a mood of blah, blah, blah. Do you think that use of colour has helped this or hindered it? So we can answer questions like that. But during the normal run of the courses, the two of them, I will never say, well done, meaning that's a good painting. I will only ever say, well done, you've really tried to apply this. You've really asked yourself some very good questions. Your journaling sounds as though it's really, really helping you. So I'm always focused on what underlies the presenting symptom.
So are these courses online? Are they?
Yeah, they are. Yes, Louise offers just once a year. She starts with a free taster course, and it's called the Find Your Joy Taster. And that's followed by a 10-week Find Your Joy course online. Because they're online, any number of people can sign up. And then for those who have done that, who wish to go deeper into the principles that she teaches and learn more subtleties, is Find Your Voice, and that's a 7-week course. So 18 weeks in all, Taster, Find Your Joy, Find Your Voice, back to back. And we are currently coming into week 4 of Find Your Voice. So we'll have 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then it will be done until, and if she does them again next year. Her life is in a state of flux. She's never quite certain if she's going to repeat things. She might completely rework the whole thing, but that's what she's been doing up to press.
Well, it's funny that you talk about that, because my whole book is based on the premise of me going and taking a yearly retreat and focusing with a mentor. And what you're saying is, I think I resonate also more with you, is I really work on the mental issue, the consciousness. I will say the consciousness of the painter.
Sure.
And I have thought about putting together a course myself, based on my book. And I wrestle with that, because I don't want, I can teach technique, but my goal obviously is to get people to discover what's unique in them. Yes. And do exercises that they explore that. But I don't want to be that guy, right? That guy that I took 20 years ago that made everybody in the room look like little mini guys.
That's right. Well, in that sense, Chris, you totally resonate with Louise. That is precisely what she is doing. She is not teaching anyone to paint like she does. She is there to enable everyone to see that they are an artist. They haven't spent X dollars to be on this course if they're not an artist. And she wants them to uncover the artist within. So very much in tune with yourself, Chris.
Yeah, it's my mentor, Virginia Cobb, in Santa Fe. I was always amazed. We'd go to this course and she'd greet us at the door with a cup of coffee, and she had such a wonderful presence. And I feel like that presence is really what sets the stage for this wonderful class. Yes. But she never went around and said, you will all draw oranges, or it was very, everybody was working and doing their own thing. And only if you asked, would she say something. She didn't walk up, and I've had instructors walk up and grab my brush out of my hand.
You too? Yeah. How dare they?
I know. And they start applying stuff, and I'm like, that's not helping me. Don't do that. And they start slamming stuff on, but she would just sit there and like we talked about with the critiques, I remember she was very careful that you couldn't sit there, and you had to always give positive feedback. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't sit there and go, well, that stinks. It was always encouraging. And I remember it was hard on me because I came from a marketing background, a graphic design background. And I was very, exacting. And I'd be like, I want to tell them what you do to fix that.
Yes. This is exactly, as I say, that the way that Louise teaches and the way that we coach. So it's very much in tune with what you're saying. Yeah.
And so you have a group of people in your class, like the one are you teaching one right now then?
Yes, we're in the midst of Find Your Voice, the second of Louise's 2 big courses. And it's a smaller group, much smaller group, because it's more advanced, and you get about 50% of the people, that move on. So we don't, as coaches, there are 6 coaches plus Louise, the teacher, and we don't have individual people that we work with. We work with the group, and we each of us goes online for a set shift through the day. And because we come from the UK and the US and Australia, we cover the time zones so that we can come into the group and we can pick up on what people are asking and what people are showing and sharing and wanting to know. And we make our comments. And then every week there are 2 live calls to catch the time zones, one in the Wednesday morning UK time, one on the Thursday evening UK time. And there's always 2 of us on. So it might be Louise plus a coach, or it might be 2 coaches, and we answer live questions. Some have been submitted before, and some often arising from the other questions that have just been asked and answered. So that's how we do it. We coach as a team, but as very much individuals. And Louise has never, ever told us how to coach. She chose us for the people that we are, and she let us loose, which is a fantastic way to work and to spread your wings and to develop your own unique voice as a coach. And, you know, when you first start, perhaps there's more, a little more uncertainty about, are you doing this right? Are you not doing this right? But you get over that really quickly, because you realize, or I realized for certain, here's the thing. Many years ago, before I left the church, I got the message that I was starting to move into being, not doing. And of course, oh, how wonderful, deeply meaningful spiritual message. Thank you so much. I accept. However, what's it I'm going to be doing when I'm busy being? What will I be doing? You know, it takes a long time to stop being a human doing and be a full human being. And more and more and more, I realize that I can drop this insistent thing I used to have over the years. Well, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Well, am I supposed to be a priest? Well, am I supposed to be this? Should I be doing that? I'll go to university and become a therapist. Oh, should I? And every time I tried to become a qualified anything, no. I just felt the no. I felt it so powerfully. Roadblock. Don't go down there. It's not for you. Well, what's for me? Do you want me to sit in the back row in obscurity? Because if you do, I will. I accept that. I'll be obscure. I'll be quiet. I'll just stay out of the way. And I fully took that on. I took on the mantle of obscurity along the road. And wanting to be a thing that the world recognized, you know, here's a piece of paper that qualifies me to be that thing. I knew I was called to have no qualifications, nothing that says to the normal world, oh, we can trust her to do that. And meanwhile, the inner work was all about me being. And so today, what do I have to offer? Who I am. That's it. That's all there is. That's all I've got. Obviously, you know, 67 years of being alive comes into there, but mostly I call on the flow in the moment to say whatever it is I say, rather than tapping into a bank of learned knowledge. So it's wisdom as opposed to knowledge, and it's not my wisdom, it's the eternal wisdom, which as a conduit, I have access to, as do you.
Oh, I do. Oh, wow. Yes, I love that. And I would just remind the listener that bringing just you is everything. It's everything. Yeah. And I have such a similar path there too. I have thought and been offered. I don't know if you know this, but I'm a spiritual coach through Center for Spiritual Living, and I've thought about, and I still occasionally think about it. Should I be a minister? Should I go on to the training? And then there's a part of me that goes, but wait a minute, I have all I need right now.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of times we go for that certification, thinking it's a thing, right? It's just like a thing, but it's just a thing. It's not really who we are. And so for you to just bring your full self to life.
Yeah.
Isn't that what a spiritual artist is? Bringing your full self to your painting, to this conversation, to the moment, to life, to the morning, to the sun. Wow.
Yeah. And you know, there's a really contrary thing about this, because some people feel that they need the study and the qualification, the certification, the rubber stamp, in order to be confident in what they present. And that to just turn up as oneself is very scary, maybe. That makes it very vulnerable. However, here's a soundbite for you. But I'm sorry, but I did come up with it. And I discovered that my vulnerability is my safest place. My vulnerability is my safest place, because there's nothing to live up to. There's nothing to prove. I just rest. I just be. And that vulnerability is simply the openness to say whatever the words are that come up in that moment. And I don't have to check my notes. You know, am I following the party line here? Is this what I'm supposed to tell people? None of those.
I love it. I love it. It is true. You talk about, I feel like that it's a surrender. For me,
Yes.
vulnerability is a surrender. And I know people have trigger with, I don't mean like a giving up when I say
No.
surrender. I mean, it's a trusting, a knowing, a belief that there is a greater, a power that flows through you and all things. And that this power, this energy is going to always serve you the
Yes.
best.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought up the word surrender, Chris, because it's a powerful word for me too. And it's something I offer when the moment is right to other people. Years and years ago, I remember saying, well, imagine, you know that as a human being, you can lie on the top of a body of water and float. You know that. You know it. It's weird, but it works. And so if we surrender, that is what we are effectively doing. We are lying back on the gentle current. And it's not giving up, because when we float, we have to remain alert to the movement of the water. We have to go with it. If we just lie on water as though we were lying on the floor, we sink. So to be responsive to the flow is to surrender to it. And I speak about surrender a lot to people who are struggling and fighting with things. And I also recognize surrender as both a practice and a path. And I can say, that's what my path was from the minute that this power came in. I surrendered to it completely and utterly. There was nothing in me to resist at all. And there was no longer any desire to do anything but be in tune with this power, to serve in some way. And so it's been the path of surrender. And, it takes a lot of peeling off of layers over all these years to continually become more and more human, more and more the me that is meant to be in the world, and a letting go of a need to know what it is I'm supposed to do. Just keep showing up, the opportunities to do particular things, they arrive if they're meant to.
Wow, this has been a wonderful interview. Is there anything I try to keep? We could go on for quite some time, I think. And I've had people come back, several months down, so we'll just put a little bookmark there.
Yeah.
But there's so many wonderful points in here. What a wonderful conversation. Is there anything that you'd like to share that we didn't let you finish out, or something that you would like to share while we're here?
The more recent thing that happened a few months back, 2 or 3 months back, was I just found myself stopping painting, and didn't know why. At the same time, a prompt came through from a podcast about drawing, and I suddenly realized that I could draw without drawing a thing, and it was more than just doodling. It was expressive. And so I started to draw, and I was really drawn to it, and it was really wonderful, and it flowed, and it was day by day by day by day. I've only just begun to think again now about painting, but once more, we never step into the same river twice, do we? And
No.
Once more, I'm further down the flow. And my latest discovery is process painting. And this is showing me that there's more of my ego that needs to be gotten out of the way. Because however free I feel I've been, however true I feel I've been to spirit moving through me as an artist, there's been this little thing up here that's saying, about being good, about being successful. Can I sell this? Can I not sell this? And when I do these kind of drawings, I find them that I don't want anyone to see them. They're a sort of denial of some of the kind of true expressions that come unbidden, really, but are not fit for being part of my life as an artist. My life as an artist. So that ego thing is now being kind of looked at, and this process painting is starting to have an important space, I believe, for what's coming next. So watch the space.
Oh, lovely. Well, I think being open to that guidance, right?
Sure.
Is part of what it is to be a spiritual artist. You be present, you listen, you react. Like you said, you're floating, but that doesn't mean you're without control. You're still feeling and you react.
Sure. That's it. Precisely. Yes.
Yeah. So that sounds wonderful. I love talking to you, and I look forward to getting this interview out as soon as possible. I thank you for picking up my book and reading it, The Spiritual Artist. I will put the book up here and remind the listeners that The Spiritual Artist is on Amazon.com, and you can order it. Oh, there's your copy. And I once again, I keep expanding with the writing too, because I've already thought of some new chapters that I'd like to add, or the second book is already downloading a little different, a little more universal, that takes art, but beyond. So I'd like to remind the listeners to follow me on Apple Podcasts. If it's on your phone, in the upper right corner, there's 3 vertical dots. You just click there and it says follow show. And so when these new episodes come out, which I try to do on a pretty regular basis, you will get an announcement and you can listen to it. And hopefully it will keep you inspired and keep you moving. That said, I love this conversation, and I was so excited to have you. And I look forward to picking this back up in a little while.
Sure.
I think there's I hear a 2 and a second episode somewhere down the line, because there's so much, and you've said so many beautiful things. So thank you
so much. Thank you for having me. And I very much enjoyed it too. And I feel as though there's more.
Always expanding, right? Always expanding.
Always. Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the show.
You're very welcome.